Welcome to another episode of QG Connect. And this is a series, as you probably well know by now, where we interview industry leaders about data governance, data quality, data integration, just to understand their perspectives about this rapidly evolving market. And I'm really excited about our guest today. With me, I have Salma Bakouk. And to help us get started, Salma, I was wondering whether you could talk a little bit about yourself and what your current role is.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan of data quality, DataQG, sorry, and I've been watching your journey, guys, since the very beginning. So hello everyone. My name is Salma. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Sifflet or Sifflet Data. Sifflet is a full data stack observability platform. We, in short, help companies achieve more trust in their data, and we ensure reliability of data across the whole enterprise pipeline.
And I just wanted to say, Salma, just to echo your point, you've been a great partner with us since the beginning. So I really appreciate all the help that you've provided from your side too. And that's
I'm very excited.
Why I'm excited today. Yeah. I mean, you talked about data quality, Salma. I'd love to dig into that area a little bit deeper. But before we do that, I was wondering whether we could take a step back and maybe just talk about yourself a little bit. Like, why did you start Sifflet? Where did you maybe take us back to the beginning or your previous role before Sifflet?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in Paris and I went to an engineering school. I studied applied maths and statistics. And then I moved to Asia to start my career. I worked in a US investment bank. I was in their equity sales and trading division. As I'm sure you can imagine, finance is a very data mature industry, and especially in the equity sales and trading operations, because there's a lot of real-time data being processed and streamed and really used and based to make some very important and very timely decisions. And so I stayed there for about 5-6 years. So I kind of saw the adoption of multiple data initiatives. I myself was made responsible for one of the data initiatives for the sales team, and in the beginning, we were really flying blind, and we were really wondering how we could go about making the team data driven and making sure that we were based in our discussions around, which client should we give more time to, which sector should we focus on, which region in Asia should we be investing more time in, which type of client, etc. We wanted to base those decisions on data and really becoming data driven. And so we started building an intelligence layer. We started onboarding some basic use cases. And that's how we started encountering data quality issues. So we would have situations like, somebody gets called at like 2 a.m. Hong Kong time, which is 2 p.m. New York. There's a 12 hours time difference. And somebody would be called and asked questions about some data point that was wrong, or some dashboard that was misrepresentative, or some, figures that didn't make sense. And there was a lot of back and forth in that. And it got to a point where the people, the stakeholders and the people who were supposed to be data consumers just didn't have any trust in the numbers that they were seeing, and ultimately decided to just not use the data than using it knowing that it was wrong, which in my opinion, and I see that kind of this type of scenario repeat itself in a lot of the conversations that I have with current customers of Sifflet, is that data quality is more than just seeing a wrong number or making the wrong decision or losing some money to something. It's really, in my opinion, the most dangerous situation you can end into is when the stakeholders don't trust the data or the data team. And so they start questioning the budgets that are allocated to data and infrastructure. They start questioning the existence of the data team. They start questioning even like some things like, do we even need a data team? Like, what do these people do if we always are presented with figures that don't make sense? And so I've seen all that, and my co-founders kind of have similar stories, working for some other tech companies, and we realized that there was something that should be done in the space, and we decided to tackle the problem head on. Now, when it comes to data observability in particular, So Sifflet identifies, we identify Sifflet as a full data stack observability platform. Data observability in general is an emergent category. And if we really trace back to some of the best practices that we're trying to emulate, really the closest parallel we can draw there is with software development and application infrastructure monitoring world, and what companies like Datadog, New Relic, Splunk have built over the last decade. And so, fun fact, actually, as a mathematician myself, observability comes from control theory, and then it went to software, and then now it's coming to data. So who knows where it's going to go next? But in short, we took the software world for a good starting point. In software, I don't know how much you're familiar with the topic, but in software, observability revolves around three main pillars, which are traces, logs, and metrics. At Sifflet, the approach we've taken is to also look at three main pillars, which are metrics. So, really a variety of metrics that we use to monitor and to assess the health state of the data, the metadata, and the lineage. And we believe that by looking at the three components, you are able to understand first of all, the infrastructure in which the data evolves and gets created and gets transported, etc. But also be able to observe how the data behaves and how the data gets interpreted and how it's being consumed to be able to achieve that kind of end-to-end monitoring. And so we compute lineage from ingestion all the way to BI tools, obviously by going through each compartment of the modern data stack. So your ingestion, ETL, ELT, data warehousing, BI, and obviously through the orchestrator, so stuff like Airflow, Dexter, etc. And then on top of that, we have an anomaly detection layer. So that's how we've been going about solving this very complex problem of data quality monitoring and data observability. And I would add something to the fact that obviously we're trying to draw the parallel with software engineering, but testing, as simple as it might sound, has been around forever, right? When I was doing my job in data and analytics, obviously testing the pipelines and everything was standard practice. But the reality is now with the increasing complexity of data platforms, the increased even expectations towards the data and what kind of insights the business can draw from it, not to mention the exponential growth in data sources that businesses rely on. It's getting to a point where relying on just simple testing and old school kind of traditional data quality monitoring is just not cutting it anymore. And so that's why I think that data observability is really here to stay, and it's really refreshing to see that so many new companies are emerging in the space.
No, absolutely. I feel like the points you mentioned around the explosion in the number of data sources, that has really accentuated the problem. And now companies they already sort of have so much data, they're generating more data about customers' products, but now they're really trying to wrangle it. And like you said, that data quality aspect of all the assets they have, that's become super critical right now.
Absolutely.
So, it's obvious to me, Salma, that you're really like a very numbers driven person, you're very data driven, but in your, in your off time away from work, what are some of the hobbies or things you like to do when you're not wearing your CEO hat?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, unfortunately, the reality is I don't have that much free time, but I try because I'm a big proponent of mental health, and I'm trying to understand your triggers and understanding, taking time off is really, I know it's easier said than done, but we give a huge value to that at Sifflet. And make sure that we're all keeping each other accountable to that regard. So I have a dog. I'm a dog mom, so I guess that's one of my hobbies. I like to take him on walks, and I live in Paris, and the weather now is super nice. So I like to take him on walks and then explore the city together. I'm a big fan of mountaineering, so I did a few. I'm a big fan of climbing mountains and the mountain trekking. I've done quite a bit of that when I was in Asia. But now that I'm back in Europe, I still haven't, with COVID and everything and the world just kind of returning to a new normal. It's been harder to organize trips and whatnot. So, but it's definitely something that I'm passionate about and I want to get into doing.
That's awesome. No, I think
And
it's a good.
I read a lot.
Uh-huh. I know.
Yeah.
I was going to say that's not a huge surprise to me based on how long we've known each other and all the things you've shared
Yeah.
so far. But is it like fiction? Do you like to read or non-fiction? What kind of?
Oh, I read everything.
Uh,
So I've gone through a self-development phase, obviously, like everybody, and I was reading, all the books that help you get more organized. And I'm a morning person, so I think there was a book about how waking up at 5 a.m. gives you this amazing routine, everything. So I've read all of those. But now I feel like with the requirements of the job and the rhythm that I have to sustain, I feel like fiction is a good way to kind of disconnect and unwind and yeah, and have some good time and trying to think about something else.
Absolutely, that's
So
a
I've
good
been
way
reading
to.
a lot of fiction recently.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to like you said, disconnect even for a temporary bit, so that you can really sort of recharge and get back to work, sort of
Exactly.
fully ready to hit the ground.
Hmm.
Uh, and I think you shared a lot. So coming back to the topic around data quality, data observability, Salma, I think you shared a lot in terms of what some of the challenges are that are sort of leading these new companies, including Sifflet, who sort of emerged on the scene. But I was wondering, like, if you maybe had to take a step back and talk about what the drivers are when it comes to data quality, when it comes to data observability. Can you maybe give our listeners a taste of what those drivers are?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll do my best in answering the question and also giving like my opinion on the space and what I think is driving this growth in this category, data observability in general. So as I said earlier, data quality, data incidents, data catastrophes, as I like to call them, they've been around forever, right? And people have learned to the best way they can, try to add some patches here and there, try to add some testing here and there. There are a few amazing open source frameworks that have been around for years, like Great Expectations. So all those are great starting points for anybody who's just getting started with data quality monitoring and wants to also include that in the minds of people and in the culture of the organization, if that makes sense. And I'll get to that in a bit more detail later, because I do think that data literacy, data culture, and trying to install this, data-driven culture normalization is more than half the job done. And so, starting with basic testing and basic data quality frameworks is definitely way better than nothing, and it's a great way to start. Now, the reality is that over the past decade, there has been tremendous growth in a lot of sectors. There has been a lot of new technologies. Companies have been growing at great growth rates. We've seen some amazing funding rounds, and overall, it's been a great, funding environment, right? And as a result of that, there has been a lot of innovation. There's been a lot of companies getting funded, companies growing, expanding, etc. And really the era of big data, although I'm not a big fan of this umbrella term, has really expanded at its full speed. And with that comes, naturally a lot of complexity, a lot of processes that are not well done because companies were in a growth mode rather than an optimization mode. There's also a lot of discovery really in the space, because people are now realizing that, you can get all sorts of data you need if you get this from this data provider or that from that data. So it's just been, there has been a proliferation of the availability of data in general, which was coupled with an amazing growth in a lot of the sectors. Now, these two elements together kind of led to an exponential growth in the technologies that have emerged in the space. Data infrastructure and tooling has become, an industry, right? I read somewhere that there was a study that was made by IDC, International Data Center, that said that the global spending on big data and analytics solutions was over $200 billion last year. So it's becoming a huge industry. And so with all that, the complexity becomes also a big problem and a big challenge that organizations need to deal with. And naturally, the more complex the environment gets, the more data you ingest, the more data you want to produce and data points you want to produce, the trickier it gets to keep track with where is this data asset coming from, where can I find reliable data, is this really reliable, and it just becomes tricky, and that's what led to the need for solutions like Sifflet to tackle that problem once and for all, and more importantly, to make sure that the health state of the data and the data platform is tackled in a very sustainable way. So I think these are some of the biggest drivers in why the category has gained largely in visibility, and why there has been a lot of attention drawn to it. That said, we're just getting started, and so I mean, if anything, like the modern data stack has shown us how quick things can change, and how many like new technologies get introduced here and there, new philosophies, data meshes, data fabrics, and all of that, reverse ETL. I mean, there's always something new, and so it only makes sense that there is this overseeing governance layer that is data observability.
That's a great nuance, actually, because I feel like with the number of vendors and solutions and tooling out there in the market, the complexity, like you pointed out, that becomes quickly a pretty big challenge. And so how do you then make sure that the data that's flowing across different systems can be monitored in real time, can be measured, and so on? And I think the point you brought up around data literacy, Salma, I'd love to double click on it. So in terms of your point around how critical it is, maybe for someone who's trying to build that kind of a successful data literacy practice, where would you suggest they begin?
Oh, I love this topic. It's very complex, and I get into endless discussions about it with customers and prospective customers. It's it can be a nightmare. So, I mean, what I've seen work in my previous experience, and with some of the successful data leaders that I get the chance to interact with, it really comes down to making sure that the stakeholders are fully aware and fully supportive of all data initiatives in general. And this is much easier said than done, because obviously, like today, you ask a leader at your average organization, everybody wants to be data driven. Everybody will tell you that their company has invested this and that in getting this infrastructure, this new tool. They hired a chief data officer. They have a VP of data. They have a big data team. But ultimately, it's more than just a trend and just trying to do something that other companies are doing. It's really about sitting down with the major stakeholders at a company and being like, and hopefully at a very early enough stage in the company. So I get into conversations with companies like Series A, Series B, who are just thinking about hiring a data team and having some operational analytics use cases, to really sit down. Like the C-level should sit down and be like, what do we want to achieve from the data? What kind of insights are we trying to draw? What kind of operational analytics use cases are we trying to construct? Really to the detail of what dashboards are we looking at? Who receives this? What's the purpose of that? And then going into constructing the data team and then the data collection. What happens more often than not, and I see this a lot, is that companies get to a stage where like, oh my God, we need to become data driven tomorrow. Wait, I can get Facebook ads and Google ads and all data from all these vendors. Let's get it. So they get a ton of data. Cloud data warehouses like Snowflake made storage relatively cheap. And so everybody's now just collecting as much data as you can and kind of sitting on it in the data warehouse. And that's really a recipe for disaster, because you just end up in a situation where you have all sorts of data and you have all sorts of, expectations really around that data when you don't even know what to do with it, and you can't find it, and you have no idea what state it is in. So I always advise leaders to go backwards around it in a way where you sit down and you look at really, like, imagine the data stack is a value chain, right? Get at the very end of it and look at the consumption level. Like, what is the expectation from the data? What is the output going to look like? what are we trying to achieve? Okay, and then you construct your way back into it slowly, all the way to get into, oh, we need transactional data. Oh, we need information about our users. Oh, we need to get the analytics from the website. So really identifying the use cases, hiring the data team, and then get into the actual, ingestion parts and the data sources, plugin parts, and whatnot. So it's a very complex question, and I always get into amazing and endless debates about it. But I've always seen like this, what we should call it, top-down approach works better than just hiring a data team and being like, so now data is your problem. Please educate the people around you as well while you're at it. It doesn't work the same.
Now, I feel this ties back to your previous point around then the question coming up of, okay, what is the data team doing? Are they really adding value? Yeah. And so then you sort of, you sort of get into a different kind of a discussion. I love your point around starting maybe with the business outcomes first, trying to define what those KPIs are that you're trying to monitor, and then working your way backwards and backing into what your data stack looks like. I feel like that's a point we've heard from other leaders as well, to just start with the business outcomes, because that helps you get buy-in, like you said, top-down sort of drive rather than bottom.
Absolutely. And like, we're not gonna shy away from this, like data infrastructure tools and all these amazing SaaS technologies, they're not cheap. And so if you want to have that budget unlocked, if you want to, like, somebody from the business needs to be involved and needs to be aware of what that tool is going to do, what purposes it's going to serve, how it's going to serve the business, before you can actually go and invest in all bunch of tools and all bunch of processes internally.
No, I love that point, Salma. So maybe that takes me to a follow-up question, or maybe around that point. So you talked about the modern data stack. You talked about maybe starting with the business outcomes. So I was wondering, like, in your mind, where does data quality, data observability, let's say, and data governance fit within like the context of something like, let's say, the modern data stack? How would you maybe think about that?
Yeah. So I'll give you my opinion on this, and I'm sure other people may disagree or have different approaches. But I do, and this is how we created Sifflet, and this is our philosophy with our products and how we're going to continue to go on about solving this problem. I see data observability as an overseen layer over the whole data stack. So a data observability tool should connect to the tool that creates your pipelines, the tool that how you do your ETL, ELT processes. You should connect to your data warehouse. You should connect to your workflow orchestrator. You should connect to your BI tools, do your reverse ETL, etc. So the data observability tool should be, as I like to draw this analogy, as data is becoming everywhere. In order to monitor the data that is everywhere, the tool should be also connected everywhere, right? Because we're past the point where just monitoring the data that's sitting in the warehouse is enough. Because again, like, we're trying to, more and more leaders are vouching for more self-serve analytics. People get reverse ETL to try to make the data more actionable and try to draw insights, in a more business-friendly way. There is a more and more complex way people are creating their data pipelines. There's a variety of new ingestion methods. So just monitoring the data that is in the warehouse is simply not cutting it anymore. So you need your data observability framework to be really, as I like to say, like an overseen layer of the whole data stack. Now, with regards to how that links to, I personally think that data quality is a use case of data observability, in a sense that a data observability tool like Sifflet, for example, should be able to do end-to-end lineage, should be able to do anomaly detection, should be able to give the users more context about data assets, the metrics that are linked to those data assets, who's watching what, should also be able to define and at least install some basic practices around access control, data privacy, and data governance in a way. And so I do think that data, at least the space, the category is moving towards a direction where data quality and data governance are going to be embedded in data observability tools, if that makes sense.
It
But I'm
does, yeah.
sure other people would have a different definition for you. So this is the beauty of contributing to the creation of a category.
No, absolutely. I feel like data quality, data governance, they've been around for a while, but maybe they were sort of thought of as more around nice to haves. But now it's becoming really like a must have. And data
Yeah.
observability, I think, is a hot topic that I know has really sort of come to the forefront in the last couple of years. So no, your point is very well taken. And in terms of maybe if you could think about where the market is going in the next couple of years, Salma, in terms of data observability or just broadly speaking, could you maybe share your thoughts there?
Oh, absolutely. So I'll give you a real life situation to give you a taste of where I think the market is going. So we started Sifflet a bit over a year ago, a year and a half ago now, right? When I was debating to leave my finance job to start a company, obviously I started interviewing a lot of data practitioners, and I started reaching out to a bunch of people, asking them, hey, is this a problem that you have as well as your company? What are you doing about it? If there was a tool, would you pay for it, etc. And I went into so many conversations where I had to, like, people are like, yeah, it is a problem. We've been trying to do some basic testing. We still haven't had a big data catastrophe yet, so we're not sure even how to allocate the budget. We don't know what kind of tool we're looking for. We don't even know if that's even feasible. Fast forward to now, a year and a half later, these same people are coming back to me, following up on our conversation from 18 months ago and saying, hey, we think data observability is a must-have in our data stack today. We have the budget, and this is what we want from a tool. So it's to me, it's super. First of all, as a founder, that's super gratifying, because you're like, oh my god, I'm not just building something that's useless. But more importantly, the speed at which the market has gained in maturity has been mind-blowing. And I think it's thanks to the efforts of all the companies involved in this space, and all the marketing efforts and all the evangelism that's been done in trying to bring this issue to the surface, and help people define their expectations from a tool or a framework, but more importantly, help people put a number next to this issue and be like, oh my God, yeah, that costs my data engineers time, and data engineers are super expensive. So that costs my company money. And so that's it's been super refreshing to see. Now, fast forward, like where I think we're going, and where I think will be, relevant to people who are watching the category to watch for. I think in general, like any new category that gets created, there's been a lot of divergent approaches. So there's been, people focusing only on data quality, people focusing only on lineage, people doing data discovery, but that's a different story. And there's been like some frameworks for data privacy, access control, data governance, blah, blah, blah. I think that all of this is going to converge towards one thing in the future, in a sense that, and I see this in a lot of the conversations that I get into with customers and with investors, is that there needs to be some consolidation. There needs to be some definition of the single source of truth as far as data observability and data reliability go, right? Because when you think about it, and this is where we have the modern data stack to thank, it definitely created a standard for what a data platform should look like, right? And so you'd be hard pressed to go to a new, company that just raised a Series E or whatever, and not find at least some similar tools or whatever that you would find in another company, right? So this, this whole concept of the modern data stack is really an amazing thing for the industry, because it definitely defined a standard. And so, again, as I like to think, data observability is an overseen layer, is a top of stack layer. It only makes sense that there is some consolidation around all of these components that have been until now kind of tackled one way or another. There are definitely going to be some conversions in that area as well. But again, like it's a new category. I'm super excited to be part of it with Sifflet. And really it's an amazing opportunity for people who love innovation and love product development. So
no, I wanted to say I can clearly see your passion for the field as a whole and for what you're doing at Sifflet. So full credit to you for for the amazing work you've done. And that,
thank you, and full credit to you guys for shedding the light on things like this.
absolutely, no, glad to help. That actually takes us to our last question for our session today, Salma. So in terms of maybe best practices or lessons learned, could you talk about what someone who's, let's say, struggling with a data quality challenge, where would they need to start, in your opinion?
Yeah, awesome question. As I alluded to in the beginning, if we're looking at a company that's just getting started with some basic use cases, let's say they raise the Series A or B, they start to do reporting to investors. They have some very basic use cases, like they want to know MRR, ARR, all of those numbers, and be able to share them in a timely manner. I think getting started with data quality or data testing or pipeline testing or something like DBT or Great Expectations is a great place to start, because it kind of educates the people internally as you go that data quality is something that we should be watching. Data quality is something that should be top of mind. And it even helps people define their expectations from a data quality tool. Because of course, like, you're gonna start with something basic, and then one day that basic framework is not gonna work anymore. And you're gonna realize, oh my God, I need that other thing, or I need that other feature. And then you get to a point where you're like, well, actually, I need data observability platform or data observability to kind of cover everything end to end. And so the worst thing you can do is just sit on it and be like, okay, well, 5 years from now, we're going to make 100 million ARR. And then we're going to start having, money costing data catastrophes, and we'll think about it. That's definitely not the way to go about it. Like, at least basic free testing is better than just sitting on it and waiting for a later time when things will become much more complex and much harder to deal with in terms of complexity. So I always advise people, from like the folks that I get to talk to and exchange ideas with, to start with something simple, because it builds good practice in people's minds as well. And then as the company grows, as the use cases become more complex, as you ingest more data, then you kind of give that data quality monitoring framework an upgrade by moving into something that also does lineage, something that also does metadata discovery, something that can help you do root cause analysis, incident management, etc. Things that matter more to a larger organization, but the adoption would be much easier compared to somebody who's starting from scratch with something that is big and shiny. There is this French saying, I'll try to translate it. It basically says, you shouldn't use a hammer to kill a fly. And so, imagine the fly as being the data quality issues. You shouldn't start with the hammer. You should start with something small. And then as the fly becomes, an army of flies, then you use the hammer maybe, or you use a pesticide or something. But you get my point.
No, that's a great sort of takeaway, Salma. And for our listeners and our viewers, if you have a problem that you're trying to solve, like Salma said, definitely don't sit on it. So maybe start small, build those successes, and maybe then socialize it across the rest of the organization. Or if you're a larger company as well, that's something that you definitely shouldn't postpone. So that's a great takeaway for our listeners, Salma. So, I mean, again, I really enjoyed our chat, first of all. So
likewise,
thank you for taking the time. And I definitely love to continue our conversation, continue partnering with you guys. So all the best to you for the rest of this year. And again, really enjoyed our chat.
You too. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Salma. Bye-bye.